right. Okay, well, welcome everybody to our chance to update everybody on what's been happening with our alternative 911 response efforts. And Cicely and I feel that there are basically two main topics that we want to bring you up to speed on. And one is what is happening with the crisis response effort piece of it. And then the second part is the living room piece. And so Cicely's going to talk first about how the response piece is going.
Yeah, so as you all know, the state has issued the contract to Trilogy to do response in the Evanston community. And so they, started building their team and are working through some kind of, not glitches, but some kind of things with the state in terms of the call line and all that. But they have started responding to calls. Initially, they were responding to kind of calls that came in through their clients or kind of partners that they had, but they did, I think just 2 weeks ago, maybe, Eleanor, start responding to community calls. So they haven't really done a huge advertisement of such because they wanted to make sure, again, with their staffing capacity and, response time and all that, they were going to be able to do that. They are not responding kind of in a 911 time, response time, just because they don't have the staff for that. But they are taking calls through their, is it called a crisis line? Is that what they're calling it?
I think so.
Yeah, through their crisis line. They are still working with the state on this 888 number that the state will host it in the long run, but they're taking calls to their response line. I think there's a team of 1, 2, 4, 5.
No, in terms of number of teams?
The number of people they have.
Yeah,
4?
well, they actually mentioned even 9. I thought they had 9 staff.
Oh, are they using some other? No, see, Eleanor's probably.
No. But
I guess the thing on people are talking about the ones who have been on the calls with us. So maybe they have 9, or they were hiring some staff just.
But they were still needing more staff. Yeah.
Yeah, they were using some staff from another program. But anyhow, so they are responding. They're working with their protocol with the state, and so they did put a flyer out that Eleanor. I don't have city access to my email anymore, so Eleanor is going to share the flyer.
I'm going to see if I can find it here.
So they do have a flyer which they've been using and getting to their community partners in the library. So Patty probably, I don't know, Kristen, have you seen it? Okay. Oh, okay, good. So they've been getting it out a lot and having a meeting. We have been meeting with them monthly to get an update. Right. So when we got on the call, Eleanor was, Kristen, before you came, speaking of, there was an article in the paper about the police working with Trilogy to do some do some outreach downtown regarding panhandling. So I have lots of feelings about that. The main one is that these are not co-responders, and we've been pretty clear about that in our work, and that is not what the state contract calls for. I think they're a little bit of a gray area because they're not necessarily responding to calls. But we know, from all the work that we've done, that people might be hesitant to call this team if they see them as an arm of the police, right? And that's exactly what we're trying to not have happen. So Eleanor and I, or Eleanor and the mayor, or Eleanor and I and the mayor will do some outreach to the police just regarding like making sure we have clarity in terms of what the Trilogy team's scope of work is and what it's not. And then there's still kind of this lingering conversation about them getting calls through our 911 team. I think they were trying to kind of work that out with the state people. And then we still, have offered to have our 911 team do some, do the training with
Cahoots, right?
Cahoots, yep, to make sure that they're, asking kind of more relevant questions so they can make sure if they're sending out the right people or, to these calls. And I think the other concern that Trilogy has is, to date, they don't have the capacity to do 24/7 and responding in like the 3 minutes or 4 minutes that the state requires for police and fire to respond. So we don't want to put them in a space where people are calling 911 and there's, maybe it takes 10 minutes for them to get there. So we kind of need to still work out the kinks of that and figure out when Trilogy might be at the point of doing that. And then when our staff are at the point of feeling confident. I think what's happening right now is that police or fire are getting calls that there is enough of a relationship that they might just be calling over through the crisis line, for now when they feel like that's an appropriate thing to do. So, so this is very exciting. We're getting there. We knew it was going to be kind of a, some work to get us there. I think the other thing for us to think about as a team and maybe have Trilogy weigh in on is, do they need help, or will it be helpful for us to do some of that community education we talked about, right? So we can make sure people kind of know who they are and what they're doing. Eleanor and I's last conversation talked about, the vehicle, and if we want to do like equipping them with the police response. I think they were interested in some of that, but maybe not all of that. But again, I think being a new state contractor, or this being a new state contract, they're still trying to like work out with the state what the state wants them to do and kind of what their liabilities are and all those kind of things. So hopefully by the summer, more of that will be worked out so that we can help them with the community education piece. And, they're kind of in whatever marked vehicle with whatever shirts that people can, recognize them. And then we can make sure that, obviously they understand and know our police and all that, but then there's still this separation so people do feel safe calling them and using them. Because if we don't do this right, then, we kind of lose a resource. And to the point about just about the panhandling, I did reach out to the senator who wrote the bill actually for this work, and it is definitely not a co-responder model. So he said they're working with a few different communities that have kind of tried to make this a co-responder model, because that is clearly not in the bill. And so they want to make sure on their side too that when they're giving these contracts to agencies, that it's clear what their scope of work is and what it is not. And so I think they're going to be working on that language as well, just on the state side. So maybe they might send something out to the contractors and to the municipalities just to clarify that, so that we can make sure we're all in alignment. So because we definitely don't want to be at risk, like losing this service because we're not utilizing it the right way.
Yeah, no, I think Trilogy, from Chris Mayer's comments at Trilogy, he's very aware that it's not supposed to be a co-responder model, and it's just going to take a while, I think, for our police and fire to feel comfortable with that. And then we do have to address this, whatever the mandated response time is. Because I guess right now the Trilogy teams, it's not like they're in a special vehicle just waiting to respond to a call. So it does take them a while to get to where the person in need is. But
yeah, and then we have to allow them time. I mean, if they doing, are working with someone, that's not just a quick, imagine there's conversation and all that. And then if they need to transport someone to the hospital or something, that's not like a quick handoff either. So their calls are going to probably take much longer than our police and fire ones do as well. So I did, I let, the mayor couldn't come today, but I, did tell him I think we need to have some kind of conversation with police and fire to make sure that they are, because it also puts Trilogy in a hard place if they're, trying to be good neighbors, and police and fire are like, hey, can you respond to stuff? Imagine it puts them in a hard place. And so for them to have some guidance from our committee and the mayor and the council to say like, hey, that they can't ride along, they can't do these co-responses, that will help Trilogy to just kind of not be in a space of having to say no to calls that they're getting.
Yeah. So have you all had any occasion to connect anybody with Trilogy or the crisis line or anything? No.
We have not yet. We've, Chris has come and talked to our program staff. I've talked with Chris on numerous occasions just about all sorts of different things. And, we have the flyers here, and our clients and our clients' families are aware of it. But to my knowledge, have not attempted to use it yet, but seemed, happy isn't the word, but, glad that there was, a different option. But I think also very skeptical about what it would necessarily look like. And so we talked through a little bit about what it's supposed to look like and, all of that. But yeah, I think, right, there's still a lot of question marks up in the air for everybody. So yeah, we're trying to educate our clients, but no, I have not had anybody actually utilize it yet.
Yeah. And Angela, does the business community, have you received any of those flyers from Trilogy, or is that more public than they've wanted to be yet so far?
Well, I think that, that article that came out about that the police officers and they were going to have, social workers or coming with them, and that flyer was included. I think that was kind of the first larger communication about that sort of thing. and they were going to be distributing the flyers as they walked the beat, was my understanding. But I don't know how many were distributed.
That was the trilogy flyer or the flyer
I
about,
believe that's the, well, there actually, no, you're right, that there was a different flyer, that there's a flyer that the police or the city was wanting to circulate about, that has like a QR code for donating to charities rather than giving money to
Right.
panhandlers. I think that was going to be distributed. But there was the trilogy flyer I've seen circulated in a few different ways so far. So it seems like it's getting out there a bit.
Okay. Yeah, well, it does seem like there's an opportunity for confusion between the trilogy program and then this, anti-panhandling initiative. So
yeah, and I think as happens with many things, it's the best of intentions when the police chief says he's going to help with this problem that people are having, and then wouldn't it be great to have these friendly partners of ours walk the beat with us, so that if we do encounter someone who's having difficulty, this person is with them. But of course that blurs the lines, like we're saying that we have to make sure everybody understands what should happen, what shouldn't happen, so that we don't have those trilogy having to say no to the police chief when he's asking for things like that.
Yeah. Right. Well, a work in progress. Yeah. Patty,
Patty, have you all used them at all?
We have not. We have, for our participants, we have on-call, 24/7 on-call, but we have let them know about it, and we do a newsletter every month. So the flyer will be in our newsletter also, but we encourage our folks to call us first, just because they know our clinicians. But it's good to know that that's available for sure.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we're the same way. We don't have people 24/7 technically, but our clients will generally always reach out to us first. But the other point of confusion, I think, a little bit for our clients or even our staff and whatnot in the beginning was, the flyers. And I know typically it is supposed to be for 18 and over. And so in talking with, and that's what's listed on at least one of the flyers, because I've seen two different versions of the flyer. And so our program staff was kind of reaching out to Chris, because we have plenty that are 18 and over, but we also have plenty that are in crisis, right? That are minors. And so I wanted to find out for sure what that process would be like, right? Would they just say they can't respond? Would SAS automatically be, or the police automatically be contacted if somebody reached out about somebody who's under 18? And he did clarify that, they would respond, and it wouldn't automatically, because that's sometimes what our struggle with some of our clients is that if people aren't actually spoken to first and SAS is just automatically contacted, right? So somebody automatically comes out to evaluate them and potentially hospitalize them. You tend to have a lot of people run away from that. And so we wanted to be sure we were passing that along in the correct way. And he said that it wouldn't be an automatic, call to SAS, but they would come and they would assess and evaluate. And if it was something, that needed further than what could just happen out there on the street or in the van or something that they're able to provide, then they would potentially transport to the hospital and SAS would be contacted. But that it wasn't, it was good for us to hear that it wasn't just an automatic, somebody under 17 who's in, mental distress, contact SAS. So that caused a little bit of confusion in the beginning, just as far as age. And I know once we have a, potential living room and all of that kind of stuff, there may not be, at least in the beginning, right? That's going to be 18 and over. But they did say that if they got a call for minors, that they would respond and assess accordingly.
Because Trilogy as an entity already, they didn't have that 18 and older limitation on their services, did they? So it's just when they think about
I
it.
wonder if that's the state, I wonder if that's part of the state contract.
I guess,
Yeah, I'll write that down.
Yeah, that,
Um,
that should be
And
addressed.
I
So there's
wonder if that's-
definitely at least one flyer that said, right, 18, it says 18 and over. I'm not sure if it's the most recent one, because
Mhm.
we had gone to give that out over when it was still limited, but Chris had said, we could let our clients know about it, and there were certain hours. We went to give that out over like the holidays or when things were potentially, have
Right.
do usually get pretty rough, right, for those who are struggling. And when we got that, and our staff had, honestly, I didn't even notice it, and one of our staff noticed and said, it's is it only 18 and over? I was like, well, we've talked like they could respond, otherwise. So I'm not sure if they changed that moving forward. But there was some confusion there.
Okay.
But I think Eleanor, when we talked about the living room, which I know you're going to update on next, we talked about Jocelyn Center because they service
Mhm.
those under 18. And I wonder if that's, I don't know, I wonder if there's some way we can make like just an Edmonton connection. If
Right.
Jocelyn Center becomes a partner for the living room, that if Trilogy gets a call, they route it over to Jocelyn Center.
Yeah, right.
And I know Jocelyn's not necessarily coming to do like this on the street response, but if Trilogy will respond and figure out kind of next steps, that could be a call that they can make for a referral. And I know at Amita, I'm blanking on her name, but the young lady who runs the kind of crisis line in Amita did say that she, they were having an uptake,
Cindy Castro.
that they were
Mhm.
having the uptake in calls from younger folks or parents, with younger people.
Yeah, right.
And so maybe even making Trilogy aware of like, if they will at least respond, maybe
Mhm.
there's a pass off to Cindy if someone is like able to
Right.
kind of navigate that piece, or if there's like an immediate thing, if there can be a pass off to Jocelyn, because that was one big thing Cindy had told Ike and I was like, she gets a lot of young people, but if they need more intensive services, Jocelyn has been traditionally the closest one. I think she mentioned maybe one more, but then it becomes a transportation issue because Jocelyn's in Northfield.
Right.
And so she even talked to, I think, and I don't know if you on that call or not, but she even talked to Ike about like, can we do not train cards, like Uber cars or something that like try to get the youth to actually get to Jocelyn, because she's like, just a lot of people can't get there.
Yeah.
Did
Well,
we
that's-
ever hear anything back? Because at one point, Jocelyn Center was looking for space in this area, right? Or
Mhm.
potentially in Rogers Park. Nothing went anywhere with that?
I think their county money moved them, or not moved them, but I think they're going to go somewhere in Rogers Park because they did get some kind of county money for a new space, but I think it's going to be Rogers Park. But last I talked to them, they were, still going to be willing to take Evans people, but the space itself is going to be, and I want to say it's like up on Clark Street somewhere. I can
I
follow
think
up
that's
with,
where they were looking, like
yeah, I
Clark
can
and
follow
I
up
think
with-
like Rogers area.
yeah, I could follow up with Commissioner Suffredin, but I think they were able to get the county grant or whatever it was
Mhm.
to open up a space.
Yeah.
That's another option if and when that happens. Jocelyn being a little bit, if they have a location a little bit closer,
Yeah.
that Trilogy could bring people who are under 18.
Yeah. Because it's clearly a need. I mean, North Shore Hospital has also talked about just a dramatic increase in the number of young people with suicidal, issues, and it's in the press, and so we definitely need to figure out how to address that. Well, let's talk a little bit about the living room then, and then we can come back to any of these other issues. I mean, as you remember from our conversations, we all knew there was a real need in the community for a place for people in crisis or people needing extra support to be able to go, that, so that the only option wasn't just the emergency room or the police department or something. And so, and then we had those presentations from Jocelyn Center and from Turning Point about the living room concept. And that just really seemed like something we wanted to add to our emergency response program. So, based on suggestions from conversations with our community partners, and when I say we, it was Cicely and I and Mayor Biss. We talked a little bit about the possibility of the foster school. I'm blank, Family Focus in that building somewhere. That that idea really didn't feel quite right. Then we had quite a conversation with Erie, and we went to look at their. There's the building that Erie is in is part of a gigantic building that had a huge space available, but it was so big that, I mean, in the future, we could maybe envision it as sort of a hub with multiple agencies, but, you know, for us to take on that huge space at the beginning when we really only needed a small part, didn't seem to be a good idea. And it also didn't feel like a living room. And then the third choice that we looked at was a small house that's right behind Amita St. Francis Hospital. And it does feel like a living room. And I think, I know, Patty, you've been to visit the building, have you? No?
I have not, I've just seen pictures of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've not been there to visit.
Right, okay. So I think I'd say call it a 2-bedroom house. Is that what you remember, Cicely?
You know what, remember, I didn't get to see it either. I did look at it
Oh, I'm sorry.
on the
Okay.
Google map or whatever, but I
Right,
know where it is.
okay.
I walked past with my dog, but I didn't get to go inside.
Sure, yeah. My recollection, anyway, it has a large living room and then 2 bedrooms. So, which is good because then it provides, you know, private space for people to be able to have private conversations, and potentially also we could make one of the rooms look, you know, younger or something. So, if, you know, where younger people could go to meet and hang out, and a kitchen and a bathroom and a large backyard. It's not ADA accessible, and it does need not anything dramatic in the way of rehab work, but it needs more than just a paint job. So when we walked through it, we were with a couple of people from our public works department. And so they're already looking at and thinking about what would really need to be done to make it usable for us. And I think I've asked Mayor Biss about this a couple of times. You know, where are we? We need a memorandum of understanding or some kind of paperwork with Amita St. Francis to be able to basically get the go-ahead to start doing, you know, serious work on a renovation plan. But I think City Council is prepared to devote some ARPA funds to the rehab, so we could get it to feel like a really nice living room. I think the conversation has been with Turning Point that they maybe would kind of coordinate and oversee the staffing, but it would be available to Trilogy, to you know, it wouldn't just be limited to, you know, folks coming through Turning Point. So we do have a ways to go. And Cicely, do you want to talk about the potential from some funding from Cook County?
Yeah, which I just put that on my list also.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so there is some ARPA funding through Cook County that they're designated to mental health and anyway, a few other things. And Commissioner Sufferton seemed to think that this would be a good project for him to nominate for his district. I don't know, this was probably now 2 months ago, and they were just kind of getting the money over to the health department and kind of figuring out the allocation process. So it seems like it will be, and I can reach out to him about that and the Jocelyn Center, but it seems like it should be probably, the county moves fairly fast about the time for us to figure out, you know, if he can give us some funding. But I think that he had asked for $1 million because that would I think we could use the money to repair the building. I wasn't quite sure about that, but at least for staffing and overhead cost for a couple, it's like 1.5 years, I think we estimated it somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So then we would have a chance as a city to work this into our budget and, you know, for the long-term sustainability, because the living room gave us a cost. We have the cost of repairing the building. And then I can't remember the Jocelyn, because definitely Jocelyn Center was there. So I don't know if they would have a separate cost or they would be kind of billing us through Turning Point.
Yeah, the proposal we got from Turning Point, and it included it. I think part of the budget was actually for the space itself. So it was more than just the staffing, but I remember something like $600,000.
Yeah, because I think the Commissioner Sufferton's ask was kind of like we could, you know, sustain us for, I guess it would be 1.5 years. And I guess we would need to see if Jocelyn is a separate cost or Turning Point, because I know they had already had some conversations with Turning Point if that would be kind of built within, because we all talked about needing the youth piece.
Yeah.
And then speaking of Trilogy, they talked about, oh yes, they were been in the, they were in those conversations of the transport piece if they needed to
Mhm.
transport people. And I think they were talking about the hours being, was it like 8 to 8 or 7 to 7,
Mhm.
and then kind of building up to, potentially some, later or overnight
Yeah.
times.
Into the evening. Yeah, right. Yeah. So,
So I'll ask Commissioner Suffren about the funding for that too.
right, okay. And I think city council is going to get back to talking about ARPA funds pretty soon, and we can, then we'll have some kind of a decision about that to be able to count on. So,
Well, we still have, I assume, and Eleanor and I keep talking about this, we still have this $200,000, not a ton, but some money. So we
right.
do want to do some community engagement or community
Mhm.
education pieces. We still have some funding for that.
Mhm.
I know that we had talked about this funding or, allowing Trilogy to use one of the city vans and have it kind of outfit with a police radio. I think that was the only thing that Chris's team thought they might want, like a radio or some kind of communications to be in touch with, but not that they were necessarily then out taking calls via radio and responding right away.
Yeah, but if we're going to be using 911 referrals, that kind of communication is going to be really important.
Yeah.
So any thoughts or questions? I guess once we get an agreement, a formal agreement with Amita, and then we can have another walkthrough of the property to really see what the renovation is really needed and things like that.
I can chime in just that last Friday, Turning Point. So one of the models that we're looking at, when we were talking about the hubs and connecting other agencies is, I think when Councilman Burns and Reed, and I don't know if Mayor Biss went to, we went to Turning Point and then Jocelyn Center, and then I think they went to the NAMI site out in DuPage, and they had pieces of it where it's like employment, so substance use, things like that. And so I know we gave information, Impact did it along with peer services, that we would be on site at the living room too. So if the person that came in crisis had a substance use issue, they would be kind of triaged to peer. And if it was because they have no resources, because they haven't had a job, they would be triaged our way. If it was mental health and, kind of there. And then in my mental health task force group, we meet, and we've also, we've done some tours. And I think this is where there's been some confusion, because I'm not quite sure what the mental health task force role is in all this, but I know some of those folks and Allie from, who works with all the youth in the schools, brought that up to the group. And I think they went and looked at the space and said that maybe they would be able to do something with the basement area for youth. And so that was part of the conversation too. But I was out last week and I haven't read all the emails I had, but I know there were a few, but I think they are trying to address it. So whether it's going to be Jocelyn doing that part, but I do know that they really would like to make it a community hub, that if they really could triage folks where they needed to be. So, so I think it's really exciting, and especially thinking about the summer we had and the issues with the folks in the park and all that. I think it's going to be great for the community. But I think it's something we really need. So that's my little update, because I know we had to get some information to Turning Point, and they turned it into Mayor Biss last Friday. So,
okay.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Betty. There's no surprise. There's confusion. There's always 10 groups talking about the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'll just say this too, just in a different meeting that I'm in last Wednesday or 2 Wednesdays ago, we were told that the interim city mayor said to send, if you had proposals that you wanted ARPA funding for, to send them to poor Sarah Flax, right? But it was just, so then we were like, wait a minute, poor Sarah is going to get all these proposals, and we don't have, we haven't the council hasn't really decided on the buckets and all that stuff. So we look forward to some clarity, and I'm sure you all do too. So, because we were just, poor Sarah, right? I mean, she's
Yeah.
just the hardest worker, and I know she had some report that was due that, she had to read through like 400 pages of stuff around ARPA, and it's confusing. So, but yeah, your jobs, you got a lot going on.
My understanding is I spoke to Councilmember Burns about this, and I know he supports the living room, but would like us to have a bigger one, and but I try to remind people that as much as this little nucleus or other ones, I mean, it is in a residential area, right? And it's and as much as we want to always think that everyone is on board with everything, I mean, there is still like, it is right now a house. I think the property is zoned commercial, but it has been like an abandoned house forever. So there still just needs to be consideration given that there might be neighbors who are like, we don't want this, right? And so I know Councilmember Burns was like, it should be 2 floors and do this. And I was like, why don't we just start with what we have?
Right.
And like, make sure we have enough money to do that. And then we can build on and whatever. And I know that conversation about like having all the nonprofits there and whatever. And I mean, I think that would be great. I think my concern about that is if we have someone who is going to be, vulnerable and brave enough to actually utilize the space, are they going to do that if when they walk in the door, there's 55 service providers, kind of like, I think about a job fair, right? Like you walk in, there's eight tables, and like, how can I help you? Can I help you, right? Which is great, but also might not be the best environment for someone who's coming in to get support with a very personal issue, right? And so, when I think about when I visited the Turning Point living room when it was open, I mean, that's a different feel, right? And so it's not like you go there and you feel like you're welcome, but it's also, kind of a quiet and respectful place. And so I think that model is great, but I think we need to just be mindful about the people. Like, is that the best model for us, or is that the best model for the people who we're trying to serve? Because the people that I've worked with, through whatever volunteer things, if they are open to receiving help, it's usually not in a room with a bunch of people. And so being that it's a small house, and we're probably not going to have, enough funds. So I'm not sure if the county funds will allow for build out, or if they're really just for staffing.
Yeah.
And so we might want to think about just starting with something that we can manage for now. You have the other part of like, when it closes and everyone leaves, it's not like where the house is on a bus line. And so you got folks who are like now in a residential neighborhood, and you don't want them now, they're calling the police, like people are walking around my neighborhood. So there's a lot of things to consider to get this like up and going and successful before we kind of have this master plan of let's all be in one space.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because, and even fixing up the basement might be a challenge. So I think.
But if we're going to use ARPA dollars, it has to be ADA accessible. So.
Right. No, just make, because there's a flight of stairs just to get up into the house. So there's definitely, making it ADA compliant is going to be a big ticket item just right there. And I think the doorways aren't big enough, that whole.
And that was my concern about the Erie place. I mean, I didn't see it. I know it was big and great, but it was like, it's right near the alternative schools, the high schools open up. So if we want to have this something be accessible for young people, are they going to go there with it being even the possibility of like their peers seeing them walk into the door?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So.
Right. So my homework is to talk to the county about Jocelyn and the living room.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then asking Senator Peters about the 18 and over. I think he actually might have emailed me the
okay. And I'll nudge the mayor to nudge Amita to see how we're doing with the paperwork, so we can get to work on actually making the house a living room. So yeah.
And then I did ask the mayor this, and he was driving, so doing something else. But in terms of like our conversation with the police and fire about like trilogies and what they can do, is that anything that folks in this call would be willing or interested in participating in a conversation with those two bodies, maybe separately? Or is that something you would just prefer the city to handle? I realize we've had you on this kind of slow moving train for a long time now.
Well, I think I would be interested in just being involved in that just because of the community policing officers that I know have interacted with our participants. So I think that would be great. And we also talked to our community policing officer, Mike Jones, that we would like to do a training for them around evictions and what the laws are and things like that. So that all kind of ties into what's happening in the community. So yeah, I think we'd like to be a part of that.
And Kristen, are you nodding yes, or you're disagreeing with Patty being a part of it?
Yeah, no, I mean, where I'm helpful in those relationships, I'm more than happy to be a part of those, those conversations. If it's helpful, sometimes it's not with Moran being involved. So, but I'm more than willing. We have good working relationships with a lot of the officers, especially the community policing officers. And so, yeah, I'm more than willing to be a part of any conversations.
And I couldn't tell from that, because I saw it online, like if that was like the community policing folks or those just happen to be officers who were on duty who were doing the walk around. So
The ones
the ones who were
patrolling
doing the downtown, yeah.
Do you know, Angela, what?
I don't have a clear sense as to exactly who was getting assigned to that, because I was part of an initial call, so I don't know where it went after our call, but definitely in the way, as things get finalized, I would love to be helpful in disseminating the actual information when we know that something's moving forward and what it does or doesn't do.
Mhm.
That's as we develop the communications for the business community and residents and all of that. I'd love to be helpful on that end of things as much as I can be.
Okay.
Great. Yep.
All right.
So-
Yeah, because maybe we can even ask Trilogy about, their flyer was great, but for some people it might be overwhelming. So like if there's a condensed flyer we can
Mm.
have that we can get to the business community and James's team and everyone else. It's just like just a little bit of enough information for people to go ahead and feel safe calling.
Yeah, and definitely, it came up with downtown Evanston with, I'm sure is no surprise that some people are concerned about the idea of the Margarita being a permanent, housing facility, because not everyone is on board with things being in their backyard as it comes up, and problems that can ensue. So there's a whole lot of conversation in the business community right now around what does this mean? What's going to be, what kind of protections are going to be in place to make sure that there aren't any incidents or an increase of incidents of various sorts. And so whatever information we get around that I can as I can be helpful in spreading good information anytime I can, just send things my way.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, Eleanor and I can connect on these things and follow up with you all. And
Right. And I know, and Chris Mayers was certainly wanting to be part of a conversation with EPD and fire, just to clarify about these response time issues and what part of it is, Interim Chief Eddington wasn't here for the conversations we had all last year and a half about, wanting to get away from an armed police officer response. So
I'm guessing he followed the news. He doesn't. Like that.
oh, okay. All right. Well, he hasn't had the face-to-face.
I know that when Chris Minton got so fear, and I was like, well, he's been a bunch of meetings. He knows, but again, it's we don't want to put Chris in the space of like having to say no. And it's, it would be very easy to just say like our state contract doesn't allow this, and then
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's what it is. Okay. All right. Well, I'll call Commissioner Sufford and at least get the county stuff hopefully figured out.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Well, and we'll follow up about how we're doing with our paperwork with Amita and the ARPA funding and conversations with getting a conversation with Chief Eddington. So great.
All right. It was good to see you all. Thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah. It's good to see you all too. Thank you for all your work, everyone.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.